What is going on, guys? My name is Tyler Lauder. I'm joined here with the Aaron Benn. This is Second and Short. Welcome on in to our fifth, sixth. I don't even know. We're fifth. Perfect. We're on our fifth. We're talking about these divisional breakdowns. How you doing today, man?
I'm doing very well. How are you?
I'm doing great. We're getting through this. Everything's kind of moving smoothly. We are fast approaching the NFL draft, and I am excited. Very excited.
I can see.
Well, this episode, we are going to be breaking down the NFC North, a very competitive division, a very cold division. You know, a lot of good defensive play from 3 of the 4 teams, and a lot of decent quarterbacks. But before we do that, today, as of recording this, breaking the fourth wall, the NFL released their decade team for the 2010s.
Yeah.
Which is pretty cool. There was a total of 54 members on that, 52 players and 2 coaches. Before we get into some interesting facts, what do you take from this list? What do you think of it?
Well, I like the list. I like looking, like in the past, I liked looking through the list from previous decades. So it's nice to see the list from this decade, which I did have some issues with some of the picks. They don't have a fullback position, which I have no problem with, but they've added a position called flex, which the person they picked here is Darren Sproles. Now, should be noted, he's also on here as a punt returner. But to have him at flex, I don't know how I feel about that because, I mean, was he that great of a player that he needs to be on this list twice at 2 different positions? And if we're talking about flex, like, look at Matt Forte, who had 4,000 more rushing yards than him and just about the same amount of receiving yards. So why? I know people love Darren Sproles, and I like watching him play too. I just don't get the need to put him on here at flex.
Well, I think the thing with Darren Sproles is the fact that he also is a returner. Now, the only reason that hinders this flex position is that they put him at returner. So essentially, that takes away the special part of he's an all-time player. Matt Forte is a great name to bring up because he really led this whole transition of running backs being bruisers to guys that can, catch the ball 80 plus times every single season. And that wouldn't be a bad pick there. I think obviously they were trying to push away from new guys because they have guys like Christian McCaffrey and Alvin Kamara, guys that are, rushing for around 1,000 yards, catching for close to 1,000 yards, if not over. And I think if those guys would have, if this was their 5th season, I think they could have made it onto this list. Either of them.
Yeah, it could be just he was good at exactly the right time.
Now, Marshawn Lynch is another interesting name for me on this list. I understand he gets a lot of touchdowns. However, he didn't really start out this decade on fire. I mean, he had a roller coaster of a start until he really got to Seattle. He was okay with Buffalo, but it wasn't until he got to Seattle and he became more of, in my opinion, this list is almost, and I'm not saying it necessarily is, but it is almost more of a iconic type of people than just statistics.
Yeah, it kind of seems that way to me too, because I have a hard time putting Marshawn Lynch, as much as we all love him and he's funny and he's a great player. I have a hard time putting him on the same level as the other 3, Frank Gore, Adrian Peterson, and LaShawn McCoy.
Now, before we'll keep breaking down these guys here for a couple more minutes, but what I really find interesting is, like I said, there's 54 people on this list. Of those 54, only 14 of them are retired.
Yeah, a lot of them are active players still.
Yeah, and then there's also one of those retired players is Patrick Willis. So 14 people are eligible for Hall of Fame. Patrick Willis isn't because he didn't play long enough, unfortunately. But yeah, I mean, 40 active people is insane. especially when you think of guys like Frank Gore. Like Frank Gore is so old. Jason Peters, and they're still playing, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah, longevity is also a huge part of being great in the league. So
let's break it down offense and defense, okay? Because obviously we're gonna have our own, our own picks that we think should be there and picks that are there that we think shouldn't. If you could pick one positional group on offense and one positional group on defense, where do you think they got it right collectively?
At the wide receiver position, I have no issue with their picks. I think they have Antonio Brown, Calvin Johnson, Larry Fitzgerald, and Julio Jones. I think those are all excellent picks. For looking at defense, I would have to say that the safety group, Eric Berry, Eric Weddle, and Earl Thomas. I just want to note that they do have like an extra section for defensive back, which is separate from the cornerbacks and safety, where they put Chris Harris Jr. because he's probably the greatest slot corner of the decade. And then they have Tyrann Mathieu, which I don't know how much I agree with putting Matthew on the list as much as a player like Cam Chancellor, who in my opinion is a better safety, although he played strong safety. So I guess Tyrann Mathieu they put on as sort of like, he could kind of do it all in the defensive backfield. So I guess I could see why they put him there.
Now, for me, when I look at this, and I know a lot of people, if you look at the all-decade team from the 2000s, people would always argue those are like the best linebackers of all time. Brian Urlacher, Ray Lewis, some studs. However, I truly believe this linebacker group, if you take the top four, which in my opinion is Kuechly, Willis, Wagner, and Miller, I think those guys bring together the best collective linebacker group in any decade ever. Like, I think Luke Kuechly and Patrick Willis are some of they're the most intelligent linebackers I've ever seen. They could literally break down anything at a moment's notice, switch it all up, and stop the offense. Bobby Wagner is a field general, and Von Miller is perhaps maybe the best edge rusher of all time from that linebacker position. There could be arguments for other players, and obviously it's hard to say best of all time because I get there are other guys that played in earlier decades like Lawrence Taylor and stuff, but that group collectively I think is the strongest linebacking group that does everything from sideline to sideline, rushes the passer, pass coverage. I think it's the best.
How do you feel about Khalil Mack being on there?
He's got 6 solid seasons under his belt, so I'm okay with it.
Now, I just want to note one more thing, is that look at the tight end list is Rob Gronkowski and Travis Kelce, and I'm sure neither of us have a problem with that. I just want to note that Rob Gronkowski was not a unanimous pick to be on the list, which is kind of interesting to me. Because, in my opinion, he's without a doubt the greatest tight end we've seen this decade and one of the best all time.
Yeah, I agree, because, even if you look at his body of work, if we truly knew how hurt he was, I guarantee 50% of his games he actually played in, he wasn't 100%.
Yeah.
And he still dominated everything. Travis Kelce is a very interesting pick here. If we're looking at the last 10 years, I honestly could make a case for other tight ends that I think have more of a complete decade than Kelce. Obviously, there's tight ends such as Zach Ertz and Greg Olsen, and even Tony G played in the beginning of this decade. However, they might have had a year cap on this.
Antonio Gates as well.
So they might have had a career gap where they decided not to put people because of how many years they played. I again don't disagree with anything. Rob not being unanimous is mind blowing. It's kind of like I'm not a big baseball guy, but I do watch a little bit, and I do know some players, but it's kind of like when Ken Griffey Jr. wasn't a unanimous like Hall of Famer, and he was like the cleanest like Hall of Famer of all time, in my opinion. that I've seen because one guy just didn't want to vote for him. I just think that's kind of what this is. It just blows my mind how people can like just vote for him. Like I'm personally not a Falcons fan, but if Matt Ryan was the greatest quarterback of all time, I wouldn't argue it.
Yeah, some people let their bias get in the way of their thinking.
But not us. Not us. We don't hold any bias. So let's get rid of that. Okay, so on to the NFC North. This division has been very top heavy. You know, the Vikings have been dominating this division for what seems like 5-6 years, and the Packers have been up and down. Just all depends on if Aaron Rodgers is 100% healthy. The Lions have been a team that looks like every year, man, this team could win the division. And then we get a couple weeks in and it's like, ugh, man, they don't have blank. And it's different every year, but they don't have something. And the Bears get so much criticism from their team. And they have a great defense. They really do have a great defense. And Mitch Trubisky this year was the GOAT. He was the scapegoat. He took all the blame from everything. That's where I want to start. Chicago Bears.
2nd down and 8. Play action for Keenum, and he's taken down. Ball came out at the end. Khalil Mack with the sack.
So the Bears, if we're talking about players they've added, players they've lost. They lost in a few players, Leonard Floyd, Clinton Dix, and Nick Wiatkowski, some defensive players, as well as Chase Daniel, kind of a backup journeyman quarterback. They added a few they added a few guys on defense. They added Robert Quinn. They re-signed Eddie Jackson, that all-star safety, to an extension. Re-signed Danny Trevathan. And then they traded to the Jags for Nick Foles and all of his salary cap and everything, which is, it shows you how much faith they have in Mitch Trubisky, but really just a puzzling move in my opinion. I don't think Nick Foles is going to be the guy that comes in and saves your franchise.
Yeah, let's talk about the Nick Foles move. Because on defense, obviously, they gained some players, you know, that can help them, like Robert Quinn, and they kept some key players, Jackson and Trevathan. But adding in Foles says two things to me. One, we listen to everybody and we agree with them, and we don't trust Trubisky. And two, we are in dire need to turn this around right away. However, I think there was many options out there that they could have explored for a lot cheaper.
Right.
For a lot cheaper. I mean, Jameis Winston's still sitting out there. He's still sitting out there. Even if he commands a little bit more money than Nick Foles, you're not sending draft picks to get Jameis Winston.
Cam Newton.
They could have Cam Newton. I guarantee they could have sent Carolina anything for Cam Newton, and Carolina would have bid on it because they
sign him right now too.
I mean, yeah, exactly. It's very puzzling. I think they could have, if they wanted to kind of like have a safe option, because that's what Trubisky I think is. Trubisky is like a safe option. He came into the NFL with little experience, and everybody was like, "Nah, he'll be fine." You know, the style of offense he plays in is just going to translate. He's got great size. You know, he's smart, and our coach is going to be able to just, you know, we'll fix the inexperience. And instead, they could have went out and got Andy Dalton, who I understand people don't like the red rifle. They don't think he's, you know, a gunslinger. They don't think he's a franchise quarterback. Say what you want, whatever. He's held a job for the past 8 years. Say what you want about him.
Yeah, he's a starting quarterback. He's a quality starting quarterback. He's not going to go out and be league MVP, but he's a good, decent quarterback.
I mean, I just take this back. Like, Jake Delhomme used to be a starting quarterback. And like, that's when I think of like Andy Dalton, I think of like Jake Delhomme. I think of like a serviceable field general. Nobody that's like a big name. They're not a star. They're not going to draw on any other free agents. However, they're not going to really lose you the game. outside of one playoff game against Arizona. But we don't talk about that. But realistically, it's a safe option. And Andy Dalton, I guarantee, could have been had for a 6th-round pick. A late pick. The move's puzzling. However, it can be exciting because either this competition makes Trubisky a better quarterback, or Foles takes the job and we see if this time he can start. He did well in Philly. Philly's kind of cold. Jacksonville's a little hotter. Chicago's cold. So maybe that's what it is. It's just cold weather. Some things I want to note is that they brought in Robert Quinn. He had 12 sacks last year. He didn't really have a tremendous amount. He was a rotational guy with Dallas. They had a good line there. In my opinion, I think they had a good line. And, it's a guy that whenever I see him in the stat line, I'm like, why Robert Quinn is still in the league? It kind of surprises me. And he's only like 30 years old. But it just seems like he's been playing so much longer than he actually has.
Yeah, I'm always like surprised when I see his name pop, because he was a real standout player in the beginning with the Rams, and then he kind of dropped off, and then you just kind of hear his name once in a while.
And now re-signing Eddie Jackson was big. However, he did have a disappointing year last year. PFF had him ranked around like 66.9 rating compared to his All-Pro season in 2018 where he had a 93.2. I think it was just one of those years. It'll be more of an outlier than anything. It's not who he is. It's going to be one of those seasons you can look back and he could easily be like, oh no, 2018, my worst year of my career. I do think losing Clinton Dix is a big move. He's a playmaker. He's all over the place when he plays. I think that's going to affect him. He played 94% of snaps on that defense. And that's a lot of snaps to replace.
It's kind of a big loss for them, but the reason I think they're willing to let him go is that he's kind of been an inconsistent player over the years. He was like that with the Packers and the Redskins. He's never really come in and been that like player that could come in and be one of the top players week in and week out. That's kind of the knock on him.
Alrighty, so Chicago Bears, they don't have a 1st-round pick, because they traded to the Raiders, and they have 8 picks in this draft. They still have 2 second-rounders. They have a lot of late picks. They have 6 picks on day 3. So day 1, are they going to trade up? Are they going to move up to round 1 in this draft before we move on?
I think if they see a guy that's starting to fall and they can jump up and grab him that they really like, then yeah. I don't know if that's like real high up on their list to do. I think just if they see that like their guy they really want.
What I think will be interesting here is it all depends on what position in the NFL draft goes fast. Because, we have them down for needs as linebacker, wide receiver, defensive tackle. Now, I have wide receiver very deep in this draft. Sitting at 43, they can probably get the 8th best wide receiver, which is still really good in this draft. Linebacker, I have about 4 or 5 deep that are like day 1 starters. It's really like 3, and then like 2 are more than likely going to be day 1 starters. I think if the linebackers start going off quick, that they are going to maybe trade up. I could see somebody like Patrick Queen out of LSU slotting in Chicago and fitting in very well. He looks like a linebacker that would play in Chicago. Kenneth Murray, same thing out of Oklahoma. I can see both those guys playing in Chicago. Wide receiver across from Allen Robinson, they need somebody. I know they have Anthony Miller, but I think they need in today's offense, you need 3 guys you can consistently trust at wide receiver. And so I think if they can go in and they can get like a Mims or a Jefferson out of LSU, I think those options would be good for them. All right, so we have picks 43 and 50 in the 2nd round. And like I said, as you can see by this graphic here, or right before this slide and everything, they have all these picks right here. You're the general manager of the Bears. I like doing this. I like just throwing this at you. You don't trade up. The board's kind of just falling normal. picks are going here and there. There's no position that's getting a run on them outside of quarterback. And guess what? You have 2 mediocre quarterbacks. You don't need to add another quarterback at this point. You're on the clock at 43. You don't got to give me a player, but what are you doing? Trade up didn't happen.
I think, like you said, I think I'm with one of those picks. I'm looking at wide receiver. Like even if you get, like you said, the 8th, 9th best player at that position, you're still going to get probably a decent starter in the league. With the other pick, probably linebacker, but I think it depends how it falls. Maybe they can, like, if Zach Bond from Wisconsin drops out of the first round, I think maybe they could package those 2 picks and trade up like to the beginning of the second round and try to grab him, which also seems like a decent option to me. So that's kind of what I'm looking at, as wide receiver and then linebacker.
Now, here's what's interesting, is that we have it down, and this is, if this is wrong, you have to be mad at NFL, not us. This is where we borrow our statistics.
Like corporate.
The Bears last year were 29th in points per game scored. They were 25th in passing yards, and they were 27th in rushing yards per game. They were top 9 in all defensive categories that we had for yards and points. Now, I think rushing yards per game, I think that'll fix itself. I think David Montgomery is coming into a second year. I liked him coming out of college from Iowa State. I think he's going to step up a little bit more, and it'll help out their team, and I expect that number to improve. The passing yards per game, I think all comes down to getting another wide receiver. Taylor Gabriel was like their number 3 last year, and Taylor Gabriel is a better number 3 in a place like Green Bay or New England. It's like some place that throws the ball an absurd amount of times to a lot of different people, you know?
Like he was in Atlanta.
Exactly. Atlanta. Yeah, I don't know why I didn't just say Atlanta. That's okay. I feel terrible not saying that because that's the perfect example. But yeah, exactly. A team that can just sling the ball a bunch. And the Bears are more of a 50-50 team. They don't throw the ball more than they run exponentially, you know, compared to other teams. I think getting a wide receiver is priority. Now, the only way that I would avoid wide receiver is if 10 receivers go before their pick. Mm-hmm. Then I say you just worry about defense, and you just worry about whatever you can do. You just hope that adding Jimmy Graham at tight end is going to help, and you hope that Nick Foles will just kind of make the players you have around you better. Because Allen Robinson's elite. He is a tier 1 wide receiver in my eyes, top 12 in my opinion.
In the second round, I wouldn't rule out them drafting a quarterback if, say, Jacob Eason is available and having him like sit and learn behind Nick Foles. Because I think if I'm them, I've given up completely on Mitch Trubisky. I haven't seen anything worth keeping him for. Let him finish out the rookie deal and let him walk. And then have Jacob Eason, who a lot of people see him as like a developmental guy. Let him sit the year behind Nick Foles, and then you've got him for the future. So I could also see that.
Let's move a little bit up. Let's go to the Detroit Lions.
Concussion protocol earlier in the week, 1st and 10. Stafford deep, he's got him for a touchdown! Galladay!
This team, like I said, every year seems to have this build of Matt Stafford is awesome. You know, they have these receivers. Kerryon Johnson's supposed to be the next great thing at running back. This team is always active in free agency. Every year they're signing people. And now they're drafting 3rd in the draft. So nothing panned out. We can blame Stafford's back, you know, which I don't dislike Stafford. I think if that guy played on like 20 different teams, that he wouldn't be looked at the way he is.
Yeah, he's really underrated in the league, in my opinion. He's been like a top tier or second tier quarterback since he came into the league.
So key additions, they added Chase Daniel at backup, which he is a journeyman, but you know, having a suitable backup is key. They added a lot of defensive players here. You know, they added Jamie Collins, Danny Shelton, Darren Harmon, and Desmond Trufant. They kept Amendola. I mean, let's just talk about their ads. Like, what do you think about these players? Because a lot of these guys are, I mean, Trufant used to be a shutdown corner. Collins is a playmaker. Danny Shelton is a run stuffer.
Well, and there's an obvious pattern here too, in that a lot of these players are ex-Patriots players, and their head coach is Matt Patricia. He was the defensive coordinator for the Pats. It looks like he's just getting guys that he remembers from his day, and is just bringing them in. But these are good players. Desmond Trufant last year was not anything like he was in his prime. But these are all good players. Danny Shelton's a good defensive lineman. Jamie Collins and John Harmon are also very good. They lost Darius Slay, which is a big hit to their pass defense, which is also last in the league. So I think that's going to be something they're going to want to address, because Desmond Trufant is not going to come in and replace Darius Slay.
Well, here's the thing. Darius Slay had a down year last year, and I think it was also like one of those outliers I talk about, And here's the thing with Trufant. Trufant was once looked at as one of the best cornerbacks in the NFL. He gets cut. I think it's more of a cap casualty than a talent casualty. Last year he missed 4 games with a toe injury, and then he came back and he set a career high with 4 interceptions. And I know that 4 interceptions isn't a lot for considering what we look at. Like every year we see like the league leader in interceptions being 7+. That's kind of where we look at. But he's a shutdown guy. People don't throw his way a lot for a reason. And I think him breaking his forearm also just adds to kind of this whole thing of like, he's older, he's broken down, he's worth a lot of money. Let's just cut him and just whatever. And I think the Lions are going to capitalize on Trufant. If he is healthy, then I think they're going to thrive with him, because the Lions were terrible at pass defense with Darius Slay. They were last in the league and in passing yards allowed per game. So as much as we want to talk about Slay as how good he is, I think getting rid of him and moving forward to Trufant is going to do very well for them. Now, Jamie Collins is a player that I don't know what it is, but everywhere he goes, I like him. I've liked him since he started playing football in the NFL, and he's a playmaker. He had a 75 overall rating for PFF last year. He had 3 interceptions, 3 forced fumbles. He kind of is like a utility guy. He can do it all. He doesn't do anything great. He's not the best at anything, but he does everything really well.
Yeah, he's one of those guys who can, he's going to come in, do his job, and be very dependable.
Here's something else that is interesting, is like we see the Lions do this a lot. They lose a player to position and they sign a player at the position, but we hardly ever see them like lose a player, draft a player. Like we just talked about Slay and Trufant. They just lost defensive tackle Ashawn Robinson and then just filled the gap with Danny Shelton. So like they just kind of just like washing dishes for them. They're just washing it clean and reusing the position, not even trying to like rebuild through the draft. This team needs to hit big in this draft. They have to. They have to be tired of not being competitive. I'm not going to say being bad, because that's not a good way to analyze them.
They've been disappointing, I would say.
Yeah, exactly. Because you don't want to sit here and when Matthew Stafford retires in 5 years because he's tired of being hurt, and you don't want to do what you did with your other stars, Barry Sanders. Oh man, we wasted Barry Sanders. We never got to capitalize on how great he was as a playoff team. Oh, Megatron, we never got to capitalize on how great he was. Matthew Stafford, same thing. This trend has to break. And what I think it breaks with is the draft. This year is a great year to establish a core, to move forward, and to build upon 2020 and 2021. I think they have the number 3 pick, the 35 pick, and then they got a pick in every round down to the 6. They need cornerback, offensive tackle, edge rusher, probably some more cornerbacks, maybe another backup safety, a coverage linebacker. They just need lots of coverage in the pass game. And they also added Geronimo Allison. Thank you for pointing that out to me. at wide receiver, which would be a nice little, depth move for them. We talked about that a couple of podcasts ago. You're on the clock. Number 3.
All right, here I can see one of two things happening. If it's me, I stay at number 3 and take Okudah, the cornerback. He's as good a cornerback prospect as we've seen over the last few years, and I think he can really come in and improve that pass defense, especially if he's playing opposite a veteran like Trufant. Another scenario I could see happening is, let's say Washington takes Chase Young. I could see a team like the Chargers or another team that needs a quarterback jumping up to number 3 and then taking a Tua so they can get him before Miami. And then in that case, Detroit would move back a few spots and they could take one of those top offensive tackle players. Those are two things I could see there. If we're talking about their second round pick, I think I would probably take the position that they didn't take in the first round. If they do take Okudah, then they can get a decent offensive tackle in the second round. And if they don't take Okudah, probably be looking at a cornerback.
Now, here's the thing that I have with this, and that I agree. Taking Okudah makes sense because, like we've been talking about, their past, passing yards allowed per game, the pass defense was horrendous, and it makes sense to try and fix that. However, I think cornerback is deep this year. I think you can get a starting cornerback in the first 3 rounds, in my opinion. And I think offensive tackle is very top heavy. While I think offensive tackle has some good depth, I think as soon as you get to round 2, they're on a completely different tier. Like, it goes the top 4 guys at tier 1, there is no tier 2 for me, and then a lot of good guys at tier 3 that can be rotational potential starters, but not day 1 guys. I mean, they're going to be forced to play day 1 depending on the team that drafts them. I think trading back is the move. Okudah's there, and here's the thing. You could trade back to, I don't know, let's say pick 5 or 6. I think Okudah will still be there at 5 or 6 if you wanted to go that route. I don't think the Jets are going to draft a cornerback. I really don't. David Gettleman likes his hog mollies. He likes to draft his offensive and defensive linemen. He's gonna want to draft a linebacker. He's gonna want to do something that's like, it's gritty and it's those lines, or it's flashy and it's a running back, linebacker, receiver. Like, that's what he's gonna do. I think if this team went offensive line after a trade down, so here, okay, let's do this real quick. Projected trade. We have it going Burrow going 1, Young going 2. Who sends the right deal to the Lions? Are we going to Dolphins, Chargers, or Jags?
I think the Chargers easily would be in the right position to do that. I don't think the Dolphins will, because if they really wouldn't have any reason to trade up, because they know that both the Lions and the Giants aren't going to take a quarterback. But I mean, they could be like the Bears situation with Trubisky, where they traded up just so that no one else trades up to get him. I think the most realistic team to trade up to the Lions would be the Chargers. They'd want to jump Miami for Tua. And I think that the Lions would feel more comfortable picking 6 instead of where the Jags are picking. I think it's 9th.
Jags are 9, but the Jags also have number 20. That's why I listed them.
Right, so they could tempt them with 2 first-round picks. But I'm also not sure the Jags. I don't think the Jags will be wanting to draft a quarterback. Some people don't think Minshew is the real deal. I think the Jags want to give him a chance.
Now, here's what's really interesting. Okay, I'm gonna follow your lead. We're gonna say Chargers move up. They're probably gonna give pick 6. They're probably gonna pick pick 37 in the second round, and they'll probably go future first. I'll take that if I'm the Lions all day. They move to 6. Joe Burrow's gone. Chase Young. Chargers take one of the quarterbacks. I don't know who they'd favor. Herbert seems to fit them the most, but you never know. Isaiah Simmons goes 4. The other quarterback goes 5. Jeff Okudah is still there. However, you can get any offensive tackle you want. Are you still going to take Okudah, or are you going to take like Jedrick Wills and you're going to protect Matthew Stafford? Like, what's the most important thing right now?
It's a tough decision. I think it all comes down to what position you value more. I would probably take Okudah just because he's that good of a prospect. I think that he's kind of like just below Jalen Ramsey from what I've seen in terms of like potential. I think I would definitely take him.
Another thing that I think is interesting to talk about here is that I think the Lions could be a team that can make multiple trade downs. That same scenario that we just played out, they fall to 6 and Okudah's there. The San Francisco 49ers need another cornerback. I could see them offering 13 and 31 to the Lions to move up. And the Lions essentially could move down from 3 to 13, gain 3 first-round picks plus a second-round pick, and still draft 4 times in the top 37 picks. I think the Lions are the team to talk about. I mean, we've said other teams are going to trade up and move, get a quarterback. I think the Lions are the team to talk to trade down. I understand the Redskins that we'll talk about in a couple episodes and everything, that they might not take Chase Young or whatever. I who cares? They might not. They might trade down. They might not. I think they should just draft Chase Young because he's the best player in the draft. The Lions, though, they have options and they need to use them. I think for the first time in a long time, the Lions have a potential to move down comfortably. Alrighty, let's talk about the Green Bay Packers.
Flanks to the left, empty backfield. Rodgers deep downfield for Jones, and he makes the catch at the 25-yard line, skirts the sideline, and all the way in for the score.
They're coming off a red-hot season. Aaron Rodgers was healthy. They made it all the way to the NFC Championship game. And if it wasn't for some, elite all-pro running back, running it down their throat, they would have made the Super Bowl. They were just one player not playing away from making the Super Bowl on that 49ers offense. But let's be realistic here. Aaron Rodgers being healthy, this team is always going to be able to compete.
Right, and I think what was different last year was their defense kind of, especially in the beginning of the year, their defense really got off to a great start, which was a huge improvement over years before that where they were kind of like not as great. So that really helped them.
So what's really interesting is that as we're going along this pattern, somebody lost a player from the team that we just spoke about, whatever, that went to the next team. I mean, this is like a circle, a triangle here. Like Jimmy Graham went to the Bears. Chase Daniels went from the Bears to the Lions. And we have Ricky Wagner going from the Lions to the Packers. Obviously, Geronimo Allison as well, but I'm just saying the big name. It's very interesting. The Packers lost, Brian Bulaga, and they right away signed Wagner, and they lose Jimmy Graham, and they don't sign anybody. They keep Mercedes Lewis. I don't think they need to sign anybody because Aaron Rodgers, I don't know what it is. Aaron Rodgers just doesn't like tight ends. Like, even when he had Finley in there, he used him, but he doesn't like him. Like Jimmy Graham last year, this is what's crazy, is that he had 38 catches. 38 catches. That's it, for 447 yards, 3 touchdowns at 11 yards, per catch. Jay Sternberger, because I only can talk about his college because he was hurt a lot at start the season last year. He didn't come in until halfway through off of IR. But the general manager says that he can be a mismatch for us, which doesn't mean anything because anybody can be anything. However, he's a 3rd-round pick. He was drafted 75 last year from Texas A&M. He had 48 catches for 832 yards and 10 touchdowns, which is good for 17.3 yards per catch. So he's a playmaker at tight end when he gets the chance. Is Aaron Rodgers going to use this guy?
From what we saw when he came back, it seems like it looks like he will be using him. Kind of hard to tell. And I think it also may be a product of not really having anyone to throw to besides Davante Adams last year. They were really kind of staying that wide receiver. No one really stepped up and took that number 2 spot. So a lot of times a good pass catching tight end can take that place.
See, here's my only issue with Aaron Rodgers and like what you just said. He only has Davante Adams to throw to. I just think it's Aaron Rodgers only wants to throw to Davante Adams. And it's not that he doesn't have these other playmakers, because there are so many quarterbacks out there that play with less, 100% that play with less talent and get so much more out of them. You know, I mean, we just had Gardner Minshew work with DJ Chark into becoming a wide receiver 1, you know. Before the draft and everything, Blake Bortles had, awesome wide receivers in Allen Robinson and Allen Hurns. I mean, Robinson stayed true and everything, but Hurns, that wasn't 100% expected. And if you look at Tom Brady's body of work, which I bring up Tom Brady because Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers were on that all-decade team, which I'm not disputing it. You can be a Manning fan. That's totally cool. But Tom Brady has a brand new wide receiver. I don't know, every 2 years, he's like 3 new wide receivers, it seems. And those guys all step up and they play better than anything. So I think it's on Rodgers, personally, for this lack of talent or whatever. It's just on him.
But I think that Rodgers is a good enough quarterback that he's going to know to spread the ball around. He's going to know that he can't just pass it to the one player. I don't think he's been shown throughout his career to just rely on one wide receiver. I think they really do have an issue at wide receiver.
I mean, they don't have elite talent. However, just to back up my point even more, I mean, there was a point in time when there's a time when Tom Brady made Jabbar Gaffney look good. You know, guys like Shane Vereen and Brandon LaFell and Philip Dorsett, you know, Danny Amendola, Chris Hogan, David Patton, Deion Branch, who's a really good receiver, Wes Welker, Julian Edelman, a career resurgence of Randy Moss. I mean, he's played with a lot of guys. I think Aaron Rodgers, when I look at Aaron Rodgers' list, it should be just like this. It should just be guys that you're just like, who's that? He got that much talent out of him? Now, Davante Adams is elite. We keep saying this word. He's top tier. I'd say he's top 5 in the NFL, maybe top 6. I think within that top 5-6 range, you can switch anybody's name and re-rank them, and I won't argue with you. I do agree they need to draft a wide receiver. I know I just kind of, I'm not trying to, but I kind of just bashed Aaron Rodgers thinking that he needs to do more, but that's who it's on. I mean, the wide receivers can only catch balls that are thrown to them. Simple as that. This team improved on defense. They were a whole completely different team. I agree with what you said earlier. I think when we look at the Packers of the past, we think they're an offensive team. They're going to throw a lot. They might run a little bit up the middle, and they're going to have to do that a lot because their defense can't hold. But they were strong. Now, on the downside of that, they lost 3 linebackers. And that's not good. BJ Goodson, Kyler Fackrell, and Blake Martinez. So they're going to have to reestablish that position in the draft. They're going to have to reestablish wide receiver. They drafted 30. And I've went on a long rant. Step on in here. What do you got for me?
I think at 30, they should be in position to draft a linebacker. They added a Christian Kirksey from the Browns, but I mean they need more talent at linebacker position. I think they should be able to draft Bond from Wisconsin I'm almost sure will be available. Or maybe even it's hard to imagine. Maybe Patrick Queen falls to them, but I doubt it. I think drafting Zach Bond would be a good option for them, and people like to get all excited about the hometown connection whenever a player drafted to a team that plays where their college is. He's from Wisconsin, so they can get excited about that. Or they would also be in a good position to draft one of those wide receivers.
Same situation we talked about with the Bears. They're going to be sitting around that range to get. I would assume at the point the Packers draft at 30 that we're going to see 5, maybe 6 wide receivers off the board if they don't trade up. So we're looking at range at the same thing, like Mims and Jefferson. And yeah, Jalen Ragor. It all depends on the teams ahead of them fancy. This team could also go, Colorado wide receiver Chenault, who I'm a huge fan of. Yeah. I think he's got great stature. I just like watching that guy play, and I think he could line up across Devontae Adams, and I think it would be a great high point wide receiver for Rodgers to have.
Yeah, again, I agree.
Now, here's what I think is going to happen. I don't think there's a lot of talent out there in the free agency pool for wide receiver. And I think there's more talent in the free agency pool for linebacker. I think whatever position they don't get in the first round, they're going to go out and sign somebody. Now, they did try, they kept Alan Lazard. They signed Devin Funchess. These guys aren't going to change the game for them, even though Rodgers apparently likes Lazard. I do think if they can draft wide receiver in the first round, they could go out and sign, and it's temporary because these guys have obviously are free agents for a reason. Like Alec Ogletree is a free agent still. I think he's still got some years that he can come in and play and be a starter at least for like a year or two. And then you can draft a linebacker in the second round that can kind of transition, in 2021 as a starter. And that could be the play for them.
Yeah, losing Blake Martinez was kind of a bigger loss than it was made out to be, I feel.
What'll be key to this too is losing these 3 linebackers. If Kirksey is healthy, because he tore his pectoral last year, I believe. Oh man, comment section, don't roast me on this or Reddit, but I do believe he was out in week 3, so we didn't get to see a lot of him last year. But he's a guy that had a lot of talent. I mean, he just signed a contract extension with the Browns like 2 years ago, I believe. I think if he's healthy, I think he will be able to come in and be a playmaker better than Blake Martinez was. And he's going to have to be, consistent. And he's going to have to be healthy because Blake Martinez played 98% of defensive snaps for the Packers. So let's talk about a team that has lost more than any other team in this division. They have been up against that cap space. As we keep saying, they were in salary cap hell, and they're trying to fix it. Let's talk about a team that's been in the playoffs for a couple years in a row, the Minnesota Vikings.
Dalvin Cook, that's what he can do. There he goes. Dalvin Cook, all the way in for a Viking touchdown.
So if we're going to talk about all the players they lost, and they lost some good players. They lost Everson Griffin on the edge. Stephon Diggs, they traded him to the Bills. They got a good haul for him. I thought they got a good deal out of that. Linval Joseph from the defensive line, Trey Waynes and Rhodes from the defensive backfield, as well as Andrew Sendejo. And then Mackenzie Alexander and, is losing Laquan Treadwell really a loss, or is kind of a gain by loss?
I think Treadwell has the skill set to be a serviceable wide receiver in the NFL. I really do. I think he was hindered by a team that, while they did pass, a decent amount, I think Cousins favors his top 2 options. Cooks gets some catches. Rudolph's there. I just think it was too crowded for him. Granted, him going to Atlanta isn't going to change the crowded scene, but I wouldn't be surprised if he outperforms whoever the Vikings have at number 3 or number 4, because I think it could happen.
Oh, they tagged him? Okay, they signed Kirk Cousins to an extension, tagged Anthony Harris, added Michael Pierce from the Ravens, and then they added Tajay Sharp, who, since I'm a Titans fan, I know a bit about Sharp. And I think from what I saw on Reddit, Vikings fans are getting a little too excited about Tajay Sharp. We drafted him in the 5th round a few years ago. He was exceptional in like training camp and everything. He's one of those guys who like comes out and like really impresses everyone in training camp. He's not gonna be their number 2. He's not gonna come in and replace Stephon Diggs like I've seen people claim. He's a very dependable 3rd down receiver. Like he saved us a lot on 3rd downs throughout the last few years. He's great if he's your number 4, maybe the number 3 guy, but if he's your number 2, you're in kind of a problem.
Okay, well, here's what's interesting about Tajay Sharp is that unless the Minnesota Vikings draft a wide receiver, he's going to be competing for number 2 duties. Now, the Vikings fans right now, I know you guys out there, those that are listening, you guys are big BC Johnson and Chad BB fans, which I get. You know, they're 2 guys that have this hype. They can maybe develop into playmakers for you. I don't want to ever talk negatively about teams. I really don't, because I'm a fan of the NFL, if anything. Like, I know I have a team I follow, but I really just love football. And I honestly think the Minnesota Vikings are going to be taking a step back this year. I think they are potentially going to miss the playoffs just because they lost all this talent. And I know people can say, like, losing Xavier Rhodes, who was broken down, hardly played or whatever in the past couple years, he's still a former All-Pro. Trey Waynes and Mackenzie Alexander, Andrew Sanjeo. I mean, that's 4 defensive backs. That's 3 cornerbacks. That's not good. They have Mike Hughes there, who they drafted a couple of years ago, who's there for them, who played 63% of snaps on defense. I'm going to read you some numbers. And this is why I think they're going to be in a world of hurt next year at cornerback, unless they address this. I just told you Mike Hughes played 63% of snaps for defense. Here's the next 3 cornerbacks on their depth chart right now. Not going to name names. And the percentage of snaps they played last year. 45%, so not bad. 13% and 1%. These guys are not guys that have lots of starting experience. These are guys that come in, they play 3rd down. Sometimes they'll play 2nd and 3rd. They'll come in and play the slot, in nickel package. They do a lot of special teams plays. That doesn't mean that they can't come in and play. However, it's going to be a transition period for them. Mike Hughes right now is their best corner, and I think he is best served covering number 2s. Minnesota Vikings they might need to be a team that trades back, if we're being real here. I don't think they need to trade up. I think they need to get as much talent in one of the most talented draft classes we've seen in years and have a quick turnaround. They might trade back a little bit, get a lot of good players, probably draft like 3 starters, their 4th pick can be like a rotational player, and they can turn around, go 8-8, and then in 2021, these guys will develop a little more, and now they can get back to playoffs. But I do think they're going to take 1 step back to potentially move 2 steps forward.
Yeah, and especially since they have 2 first-round picks this year, so they can keep one of them and then trade the other down, pick up a couple extra picks. So that's definitely feasible.
I think they're in a great spot because I think the New England Patriots, who drafted 23, 1 spot behind the Vikings, will take a quarterback. I think it's possible. If somebody like Jordan Love, Jacob Eason is sitting there at 23, I think the Patriots can jump on that. I think a team that's behind the Vikings, that I'm not saying the teams that made the playoffs behind them, but I'm saying the teams that are at the top of the 2nd round that missed out on a quarterback, maybe the Indianapolis Colts with that 34th pick want to move up, draft Jordan Love, let him sit behind Rivers for 2 years. It'd be ideal. They could trade that number 22 pick. It's a great spot. Move down, gain a 2nd. They could probably gain both the Colts 2nds and another pick and only have to move down 11 spots, 12 spots. This team need starters. We have them down at the 22nd pick, the 25th pick, and the 58th pick in the first 2 rounds. They have 11 picks in this draft, plenty of opportunity to play around with this. I think they need to package their day 3 picks and move up a little bit, and package their day 1 picks and move into day 2. What positions do they need to fast track a quick rebuild? It's not even a rebuild, it's like a retool.
Yeah. I'm looking at wide receiver and cornerback. And I think also maybe edge, depending on who's available, because losing Everson Griffin is huge. But I think their most pressing need is at this point is cornerback. And I think that if they don't trade down, I think they would be in good position to maybe grab Christian Fulton if he's available, cornerback from LSU, or like Trevon Diggs or Terrell. I think would also be available. I don't know if they value those guys enough to pick them at that position. But I think if Christian Fulton is available, I think they would have a hard time passing him up. Wide receiver, I feel like they can address in the second round. They might want to, with the 25th pick, they might want to grab a defensive end, someone like Matus Gross or Epinesa. Yeah. One of those guys will probably be available at that pick as well.
Yeah, I think that right there would be a great draft for them. I mean, we can let's do best case scenario for them, and it's Christian Fulton at cornerback. I think he can slot in and be the number 1 for them right away. I think that's the play there. Honestly, they need to get a cornerback more than anything. He is perfect for man coverage. That's where he lives and dies. He's got great hip flexibility, and he's very confident, and he can track. He tracks that ball so. I think he has great coverage skills. I think he needs to work on turning his head a little faster and everything. You know, playing at a good school last year like LSU, he could probably get away with a couple things that he won't get away with in the NFL, which we see a lot with cornerbacks coming in the NFL, except for those like primetime elite guys. He's a great pick. And then I honestly agree. I think if they get AJ Epinesa from Iowa to play edge, who at one point in these like projections, you know, before the combine was projected in the top 15. And then he came out and had a so-so, you know, combine. And again, people see these combines and they just go one way or the other. They don't just go, okay, maybe it was a bad day. And he doesn't have a pro day to make up for it. They could benefit from this, and they could get 2 starters right there and then get whatever wide receiver they want in the second round.
Yeah, I think they are, with having those 2 picks, I think they are in a really good spot to either trade down or get, like you said, 2 day 1 starters. If
for some reason at pick 58 they can get this guy, that wide receiver out of Arizona State, Brandon Ayuk, who I think is better than he's not getting talked about at all, because he played in the Pac-12, and you know he's got decent size. He's 6 foot tall, around 200 pounds. He's a fighter. He's one of those guys he's very gritty. I like to talk about them. He's similar to like DJ Moore. You know, he's a guy that's going to get the ball in space, and he's going to be able to just get yards after the catch, and it's awesome. He's a playmaker. Now, there are his biggest comp, unfortunately, is Cordell Patterson, and I hate when they give players those comps, because like Cordell Patterson is a special teams like player. I don't like when people do that.
It immediately puts a negative connotation.
But what's crazy though is like literally I've been looking and I can't find red flags on him. Like I find things I don't like he's not really good at contested catches. However, nothing. It's clean. You know, he's a clean candidate, and he just freshly turned 22. He's got decent age. This is a guy that could start for the Vikings and become a household name the way that Diggs was becoming. So, alrighty, guys. This has been our longest episode of the series so far, but you know what? It's fun. I think at least for me, I'm enjoying this more every episode we do.
Yeah, it just keeps getting better and better.
Yeah, you guys are getting more content, and you know, from that one Saints fan that told us that we were trash or whatever, and we don't know what we're talking about. You know what? You might be right. That's okay. We're just some fans trying to have some fun, create some content for you guys. So if you guys liked what we had going on here, look at the very bottom of your screen, that bottom right-hand corner, click that subscribe button, be ready to notify and everything, hit that bell, like the video, leave a comment down below. Tell us exactly what that Saints fan on Reddit told us that we don't know what we're talking about. Tell us whatever you want to tell us, and we're going to respond to you guys. This has been Second and Short. I'm Tyler Lauder. He is the Aaron Benn. You guys have a good night.
Me too.